Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Jean Golding Institute Data Week Online 2021, an interactive program of seminars, training, and workshops showcasing the latest in data science and artificial intelligence, running from the 14th of June until Friday, the 18th of June. The Jean Golding Institute is a data science hub and is a data science and data intensive research institute at the University of Bristol. We are one of 5 university research institutes, and we connect a multidisciplinary experts throughout the university and beyond. The Jean Golding Institute collaborates with international partners such as the Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya. They spoke yesterday at Bristol Data Week. We also work with the Institute of Statistical Mathematics in Tokyo, Japan, and with national partners. We link, for example, with the UK National Data Science and AI Institute, the Alan Turing Institute. We offer a range of events, training, funding opportunities, and coordinate a data science consultancy service called Ask JGI. You can find out more about our all the activity that we do on our website at bristol.ac.uk/Golding. Thanks to the generous contributions from our collaborators and partners, all of Data Week events, including training and workshops, are completely free of charge. So thank you so much for your collaboration. Next slide, please. There are plenty of opportunities to connect, so do keep in touch. We have a lunchtime networking session coming on Friday at 1 p.m. Or you can look at our blog, subscribe to our newsletter, we send that once a month, and you can join the Data Ethics Club that meets every 2 weeks. You can also continue the conversations at Twitter at JGI Bristol/Data Week. Next slide, please. There is also an opportunity to get involved in the next big event, the JGI Showcase, taking place on the 17th and 19th of February next year. This hopefully will be our first face-to-face event taking place at the M Shed, and it will be a family-friendly event open to the public. We will be showcasing data science and AI research and highlighting societal benefits. We will have inspiring speakers, interactive displays, artwork, and workshops. So I hope you can join us. And if you'd like to showcase your research, please get in touch. And now this is the end of my slides, but it's a great pleasure to introduce our next speakers, Professor Ian Craddock and Miquel Perello Nieto. Professor Ian Craddock has a cross-faculty position as an institutional lead for digital health at the University of Bristol. He's the director of the National Centre for Doctoral Training in Digital Health and the Bristol MSc in Digital Health. Ian has had leadership roles in both academia, including the flagship 16 million EPSRC Sphere Digital Health Project, and industry as director of the Toshiba Bristol Research Laboratory. He's a fellow of the IEEE and the IET. He has a long-standing interest in electronics, computer science, healthcare, and in ethics, and he has chaired numerous national review panels and strategic boards. Miguel is currently pursuing a PhD in computer science at the University of Bristol while working as a research associate in the IRC Sphere project. He received an MSc in machine learning and data mining from Aalto University School of Science and an MSc degree in artificial intelligence from a consortium between the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Barcelona and University Rovira i Virgili. He holds an BSc degree in technical engineering and computer science from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. He has extensive experience as a technical service manager, software developer, and also research positions in Finland, United Kingdom, and France. He's currently working on interpretability of machine learning classifiers and assessing the quality of the probabilistic predictions. Ian and Miquel will discuss the progress and achievements of the Sphere project. Sphere stands for a sensor platform for healthcare in a residential environment, a multidisciplinary project that aims to characterize the health-related behaviors of a household of the periods of months and even years. You will hear more about the challenges of collecting big data from family homes. Thank you so much, Ian and Miquel, for joining us today.
Thank you, Patty, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be part of the JGI event this week. Mikkel and I are going to take you through some slides and leave some time for some questions at the end of the event, which, as Patty has said, will be handled with Slido, and we hope you'll engage with us then. If, of course, you want to email us, then please feel free to do so, and I've provided our email address there. I've not consistently provided publication links through the presentation. Sphere has produced nearly 300 papers, so it's a bit impractical to link to everything relevant. But if you go to our website, you'll find all the publications there, and they're also on the Bristol Pure website. So if you have a particular interest, get in touch or follow up the publication trail. And I think, Mikkel and I would say we're very much here presenting on behalf of the whole team. We have 11 people in our data analytics team, and in our own small way, we'll do our best to do justice to their endeavours over the next 45 minutes. Obviously, within the time we have, we can't go into detail with even what those 11 people are doing, let alone all the other people working in Sphere. But hopefully, this will be enough to kind of whet your appetite and encourage you to find out a little bit more. And finally, if you'd like to tweet or follow us on Twitter, our hashtag is, our Twitter address is at the bottom there. So we wrote the Sphere proposal in 2012, it's a long time ago now, and the opening paragraph of the proposal said that we weren't going to make new sensors for health conditions, but we were going to look at data fusion opportunities from sensors in the home. So most sensing projects use a single sensing modality, like a wearable, for example. But what we were interested in is what would happen if you had many sensors in your home and you could do inference across multiple of those. At the time, that was a reasonably futuristic vision. Nowadays, of course, we're very accustomed to having multiple sensors in our homes. Many of you will have Amazon smart home devices, Nest thermostats. Many of you will have wearables. You may have webcams for security purposes, and we're very much living in a world now where there are multiple sensing systems in the home. At the moment, those are kind of siloed devices, so these devices don't tend to talk to each other, and they don't tend to be used for medical applications. But clearly, the direction of travel is that these devices will become more capable, and rather than just setting a reminder in the kitchen, it's reasonable that we'll be able to use them for more sophisticated healthcare purposes, whether that's reminding us to take medication or spotting a deterioration in someone's behavior. So the idea was we'd have all these sensors, kind of glue all the data together and do analysis and spot, if you like, deviations from our established pattern of behavior in the home. So it's a very large project. The total project budget is about £19 million from, obviously, we gratefully acknowledge our funder, EPSRC. The project runs until early 2023. And kind of the stages of the project went through were something about requirements analysis, so figuring out what it was that we wanted this big project to do. We selected a set of technologies based on that requirements analysis, and also based on some kind of educated guesses as to what the analysis pipeline would look like. So we didn't have any data, we didn't have any sensors, we didn't have any analytics when we started. So we had to kind of guess as to what technologies we were going to use that would enable us to find out the things we wanted to do from the analytics. The project went through a phase of technology deployment at scale. So because we had no data and no one had done this before, we couldn't just say, we'll just download a data set from someone and benchmark our approaches on their data. There is no data like this. So we had to actually build these systems, deploy them in people's homes, maintain them, get the data, and then provide that data, including the annotations, to the analytics team. So I will go through some of these steps because it's important to have the context for the data analysis, which is where I'll hand over to Mikkel to talk through the data analysis. But I think he can only really do that if you understand where the data came from. At the end of the presentation, I'll say a few things about the direction of travel for the project, including some of the kind of analytics challenges, and then we'll have some Q&A opportunity at the end. So our first step then, as I said, was requirements analysis, and we took a very open approach to this. We are essentially a consortium of engineers and computer scientists, or we were back then. So we simply spoke to everyone who would talk to us about what people wanted to know, what clinicians and clinical researchers wanted to know from home environments. And so some of the questions for me as project director was, do they all want the same thing? Do they want lots of different unrelated things? Because that would be difficult. Or, if there were 20 different requirements, then maybe we should split the funding into 20 different pieces, each looking at a disease condition. But actually, when we spoke to all these experts, whether they were in diabetes, mental health, Parkinson's, dementia, a lot of what we heard was the same. So they were saying that they were interested in long-term health conditions. So you wanted long-term data because someone's health status was going to change not over a day, but over weeks or months or years. That kind of meant that everything we did have to be passive, because we can't expect people to engage in research programs every hour of the day for years. So the technology we chose were ones that were kind of ambient and just pervasive in the home, rather than people having to give samples or do measurements themselves. There were lots and lots of similarities between the disease conditions in terms of what the experts wanted to know. And they all had a focus on, let's say, reasonable sized populations. So, to investigate these hypotheses that they had, they were generally saying that we need technologies that will scale to of the order of many tens or preferably hundreds of people. And that gave us some very strong requirements in terms of, well, what was our budget? So if we could have designed a census system easily costing £100,000, but if you do that, no one is ever going to deploy that to 100 people. So that gave us an idea of that our budgets would have to be of the order of some thousands of pounds in order that you've got some chance that you would be able to use it in a real research program. So the kind of outcome that we had from these discussions really was, when we spoke to the clinical researchers and the clinicians, basically they said that, if we want, if we're worried about people's anatomy, if we want to, if that relates to our research question, then we have, fantastic imaging devices in hospitals nowadays that can give us anatomical data sets. If we're worried about the, people's genetic risk associated with the disease, then gene sequencing has really moved on a pace, and it's now possible to do this at scale. So, but what they really wanted though was the equivalent of that for health-related behaviors. So in the same way that there was a gold standard for imaging or a gold standard for genetics, what they wanted to do was, well, can we have that same volume and quantity of data, not in a hospital environment or a lab environment, but actually from people's homes? And so that was the challenge that we picked up, was to design, if you like, the gold standard, the ultimate machine for analyzing human behaviors in the real world, not in the lab. So question we asked a lot of that time was, okay, people talked about, the clinicians talked about they wanted to know about human behavior, and it often wasn't really clear to us, and perhaps even sometimes to them, as to what they meant. And so we kind of dug into that. So some examples of behavior were sleeping, but not just that people were asleep, but in a multi-occupant house, who exactly is sleeping? Where are they sleeping? Are they having a comfortable night's sleep in bed? Are they sleeping on the sofa? Are they staying in their bedroom, or are they wandering around between rooms or having to go to the bathroom? So, the idea that sleeping is not just something that happens in a solid block and in one place, and that you might need to know, for example, has someone had to go to the bathroom, or have they got to, are they in pain and have to go and sleep in a different room? Mobility at home is really important. We spend a lot of our time walking, we spend a lot of our time at home, especially of course in lockdown, and actually a major amount of kind of the physical exercise that we get, and a marker of our own health is actually our physical activity at home. So not so much jogging or cycling, but simply getting up from a chair and walking between rooms, going up and down stairs. So we're not interested in doing gait analysis, because there's no really plausible way that you can do that in someone's home. But things like, how fast are the room transfers, what's the quality of movement as they're walking around, are things you can do. Getting up from a chair, getting out of bed, for example, how many times does this happen? Am I able to get out of a chair smoothly, or am I in pain and finding that difficult? And is that changing over time? And of course, the social dimension of behavior. A lot of our social contact happens from interactions with other people in the home. So, for example, how much time am I spending with family members in my home? So these are all good examples of behaviors. Cooking is another one. Not just saying, well, that there's cooking taking place in the house, but who is actually doing the cooking, and is there a change there? Is there, was somebody able to cook but no longer able to cook? And for things like cognitive conditions, are people able to cook confidently, quickly, in the same way that they normally do, or are they struggling, perhaps, to remember how to assemble a meal or how to do the steps of the cooking process? So a whole load of things that, if you look at them, bits of this you can kind of imagine you might get with a wearable, but a lot of it that you can't, especially in a multiple occupancy home. So we designed our sensor system with these questions in mind. Another thing that fed into our requirements analysis was the fact that if you're actually going to do this in people's homes, it's not a lab environment, and we can't make people participate in research. And so we had to do an awful lot of work on acceptability in terms of, out of all the technologies that we could deploy, which of these would people genuinely live with for a year? And there's lots of very obvious things like, ideally you'd have lots of wearables. If you want to measure, let's say, cooking, for example, or walking, you'd probably like a wearable on each limb, but that's never going to happen for people living with technologies for months or years. So we have a wristband because that's really the only place on the body where people will wear a device for any length of time. And it also told us things about cameras, for example, the fact that people weren't prepared to have cameras that would pan and tilt in a room, because you'd be sat there and you'd hear the motor of the camera as the camera tracks to and fro. And so we took that part out of the proposal and said the cameras had to be fixed. And so the whole thing just really had to be in the background in the home. A lot of these requirements that came out of these sessions were not able to be addressed by existing technologies, but were, we have electronic engineers in the team, and so we designed devices for that fit those requirements. So things like wearables, environmental sensors. That was the first version of the wearable. This is the current CAD render of the that should animate, but it is animating. So that's the CAD render of the PCB inside the wearable, and then the bottom picture is the wearables as it currently stands. And so we were able to select the right integrated circuits and components and sensors for these devices that gave us the right power budget and the right performance and the right data quality, and then we can write the firmware for them. We have to build back-end systems as well to glue all this data together. So we have all these sensor systems that all that data has to be collected to one place. So we need to build a back-end system in the house to receive all that data and take it to a place where it can be analyzed. And you can see some of the sensors deployed in a home in this picture. One of the main things we're interested in is localization, by which I mean is knowing where people are in the home. So I'm having trouble getting my animations to run. Okay, so this is the floor plan of a house in Bristol. And the reason that we care about where people are is that, first of all, it gives us an idea of mobility, sort of room transfers between rooms, but also it's a very strong prior for activity recognition. So a wearable, for example, can't really tell that you're cooking because there's nothing about the motion of your hand which is so specific to cooking. But if you make that motion in a kitchen, for example, it's very likely at that point that someone is cooking. And so being able to localize the wearable, but essentially using its Bluetooth signal, it has always been a very important thing for the project, and Mikkel will be talking more about that in a minute. We also have a video solution. The cameras are very unobtrusive and they don't move around. We did a lot of work on the ethics of this. And so at source, we derive silhouettes from the cameras such that we can protect people's identity. So when we spoke to participants, which includes this young lady who stayed in our Sphere house for a night, when participants see this, they can see that we have some data that tells us about pose and posture and gait, but it's, you know, you can't infer someone's identity from that silhouette. So from an ethical point of view and a privacy point of view and a participant acceptability point of view, this was a good choice, which has worked well for us. So when we say we have video cameras, we do have video cameras, but we have no video. We have these silhouettes. So as you imagine, this was quite a high-risk proposition, and you know, we were worried about all sorts of things. First of all, that the sensors wouldn't work, or that the system integration wouldn't work, that we would have data loss. We were also very worried about participant acceptability, because it's all very well asking people, you know, hypothetically, would you be happy to live in a house with sensors? But you know, actually, to know the answer to that question, you actually have to let them try it and see how they feel about it. So since about 2013, we've been operating a house in the city, not far from the university, and lots of people have stayed in that house, sometimes for very long periods, sometimes for weeks at a time, not only gathering us data and annotations, but also actually assessing, you know, is this, you know, does this make people feel very afraid or very self-conscious? Do they change their behavior? You know, would they just sort of, you know, leave the house, run out screaming and not wanting to be there after a day? And we have to give people the real experience of doing this. And so there's a lot of learning for us about acceptability, about experiment design when a home is your lab and you can't control it, for example. Also about data management and ethics and the training we need for our researchers. And along the way, we've written, for example, papers about ethics with colleagues, which you can see one of the papers listed there. And the aim then was to get this all working for a rollout in people's homes in about 2018. This is the complete set of sensors showing the wearables, environmental sensors, and depth cameras, and also all the wireless networks that the data flows over. And the challenge for us as we rolled out was that not that we wanted to run one smart house at the university, but actually we wanted to scale this to 100 homes. So at that point, just think about it, if you want to have data quality, you have to be system admin for hundreds of wireless networks and thousands of sensors and computers scattered all over a city in environments that you can't get to. So if a device, you know, falls over and needs rebooting, there's no technical support there. And someone can't just pop in with a screwdriver at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to fix it. So we did a huge amount of work, which I'm not going to cover here at all, on kind of system reliability and maintainability, all with the aim of getting data to the analysis team, which is what Mikel is going to talk about now. So I hope that provides context in terms of, you know, why do we have these sensors? What were we trying to do? And again, none of this data existed at the start of the project, and it's been down to colleagues like Mikel to design the data analysis and think through the annotation implications such that that data is usable. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mikel for his slides.
Well, hi everyone, I am Mikel. Thanks for the introduction. Basically, I will talk now about the data integration and learning. Basically, we are several people working on data analysis and machine learning, and some of us are looking at silhouettes, some of us are looking at the raw sensor data. I am more focused on the sensory side, but well, let's see. I will start first by introducing more or less the installation process, how we obtain annotations in order to train models. I will show some examples of how we can perform indoor localization. How can we detect levels of activity of the participants? I will show a couple of case studies, and finally just some other examples that I will not cover, but I will just briefly tell. Then basically this, during the installation of the Sphere system in a home, basically a technician goes to a house and then installs the system during one day. Then this system will need to stay in the home for a fixed period of time, maybe 6 to 12 months, even 2 years for some people. And we don't have access to the house on all this period, except if there is any issue that we need to solve. And finally, the removal day, just the technician goes and removes every single sensor from the house. And then how do we gather annotations? Basically, during the installation day, the technician will just gather some uh, information about which locations the technician is, and also it will gather also some information about what activities are being done during that day or during that hour. Then we will need to train models on that data. And with those models, we will need to estimate for the full period of time. Then during the removal day, the technician will also gather new annotations because sensors may change over time, or the distribution of the furniture may change, and this changes the sensors, how they sense the environment. And we can use that to retrain the model again, and then we can obtain or re-estimate indoor localization and levels of activity. Let's go for localization first. This is a layout of a house, and basically the technician will go through the house and will start installing some of these sensors. And these particular sensors uh, will be able to sense the strength signal from a wristband or a wristband per participant. Then the technician will have this wristband while he's just walking around, and this wristband will tell us what is the intensity or the signal intensity to several of these sensors that have been installed in the house. Then by doing that, we will be able to capture different values for different rooms or for different locations. This, for example, is um, during the installation day. Um, I During the installation day, the technician will do two experiments. Basically, we'll go through every single room at least once, and then he will annotate in which room it is. You can see on the top right side of the plot that we have different rooms, and the technician is annotating on every which room the technician is visiting. And basically on the bottom part, we have different sensors and what is the intensity that the sensor is receiving from the wristband. We will use all of these in order to train models. From the accelerometer from the wristband that the participants will have in their wrist, and they are capturing triaxial acceleration, basically acceleration top, down, left, right, uh, all the three axes. And this is, for example, an example of some acceleration values in gravity units on the right. Um, when the technician installs the system, we ask the participants to put a camera in the forehead. This will only be used only for this experimental 30 minutes session. And then we ask the participant to just go through every room and do what they usually do on that room. For example, just go to your desk and sit, or go to the kitchen and make like you are washing some dishes. We will capture all of these uh, um, moments, and then we will annotate those when the person is walking, for example, sitting, standing. And with those paired with the acceleration values, we are able to train models that detect what type of activity the person is doing. What can we do with that? Basically, in this case, for example, I will show what can we do detecting only how active is the person. If it's performing some high level activities or low level activities. High being, for example, just walking or maybe playing an instrument or something that requires a lot of movement. And low level activities, maybe sitting or sleeping. Then I will try to summarize this figure on the left. First, uh, each of these concentric circles is a full week, uh, from Monday to Sunday, clockwise. And then the inner first circle, it's the first week. And then as you go out of the circle, you have the final week, the last week when this was installed. Then high levels of activity are shown in this light green, and low level activities are in blue, dark blue. For example, we can see on this participant that Saturdays during the daytime, the person is quite active, light colors, and he is actually Saturdays, some of the Saturdays at home. We can see, for example, that during the weekdays, during the daytime, the person, we don't have information about the acceleration values. This is most of the time because the person is out of the range of the house, because we are monitoring only data from inside the house. While the rest of, during the night, for example, the person is at home. And on the right side now, we have estimated locations, indoor locations from the models that we train. Then, as an example, the orange in this plot, it's the bedroom, and you can see that the bedroom corresponds to the low activity levels, basically sleeping. The kitchen is, for example, in red. You can see that Saturdays and Sundays, the person spends some time in the kitchen. And the living room is this purple. You can see that before going to bed every day, the person spends some time on the living room. Then this is another example of another participant, and you can see that the first weeks the person was mostly at home, but then after several weeks, the person during the day starts going out, for example, on Mondays and particularly on Fridays, and also some days in between the week. You can check here that the person is still moving around the house, mostly spending time in the bedroom, but also going to the study and some brief times in the kitchen. Finally, this is another example of a person that in general is not, it doesn't have high level of activities, but you can see that the person is still moving around from the bedroom to the living room and some time in the dining room. Then those three participants, the participant A is one of the one member of the control group. It's a person that we had this system installed without any particular diagnosis or anything. On the contrary, B and C, they were participating in the hip and knee replacement cohort, and this was the period of time just after the surgery. 2 weeks before the surgery and the 3 months after the surgery. And this clearly shows that the people had to spend some time in the bed. For example, B had to spend some time at home, couldn't go out a lot, and then but later he recovered and he could just start going out. Person C instead had to stay at home and was not recovering as well as participant B. Another type of results that we got, also relating to this hip and knee replacement. The computer vision team is looking at the silhouettes of people in the living room, for example, and they were interested on detecting or using the sit to stand transitions as a surrogate of recovery from a hip replacement. Then what they originally did was first train a convolutional neural network classifier in order to detect when the person is sitting, standing up, or other activities. Then once all these stand-up activities are detected, then uh, those were used in order to compute a bounding box around the person and see how was the speed from sit to stand, and then try to analyze the trend if the speed of recovery of the sit to stand transition seems to improve or not on people that has had a surgery. Then here we can see on the left side 4-second video sequences of people that is actually standing. It was originally sitting and then they just transitioned to stand. This was done using the MuV Lab. It is a framework or a tool that was developed here in the Sphere project, and that allows you to annotate really quick video sequences. And thanks to that, 4 months of video data was annotated from sit to stand transitions, and then a model was able to be trained on that data, achieving a 90% more than 90% accuracy to detect those transitions. Then once we have these transitions detected, we have a bounding box around the person, and we can see how this bounding box just moves when the person is transitions from sit to stand. Then on the right, we have the person that is just going from the sit to stand transition, and you can see on red the peak or um, the fastest vertical speed, and then on the light blue, it's when the person is stationary, basically. And then with that, the position and the derivative of the position that gives you the speed. It was possible to detect that how fast the person stand. I don't know what's happening here. Okay. Okay. Well, here we have some examples of people transitioning from sit to stand, and in a small plot, the speed of at the maximum, the peak speed at which they stand. Then with all of this, we can check one of the patients that had a surgery, and the surgery is just marked with this black line after the 1 week of having the system installed. We can see that after the surgery, the person just starts going slower in order to stand. And this is quite common because at the first weeks it may still be a little bit painful, and the person needs to get used to the hip replacement. And then as the weeks progress, you can see how the speed just keeps increasing, and it reaches a point when it is actually the person stands up faster than he did before the surgery. Then here we have another example. On the left side, we have some healthy control, basically 2 houses with some participants, and we can see that there is no clear trend of going faster or slower on the speed of ascent. On the right side, we have 2 patients that had the surgery. One of them is the one that I showed before, but the other one is another. You can see how after the surgery, the person starts improving. Other examples of analysis that we can do with that data. For example, the proportion of time spent in each room every day or maybe every week. This is also informative of how, for example, of a person recovering from hip and knee replacement, how much time the person is spending on the bedroom, and we can see trends that the person stops or starts being more often in other rooms than the bedroom. On the middle, we have some other research that we have done that it's focused on actigraphy in order to find the sleep and circadian rhythms. Basically, people gets used to sleep at certain time and be active in a certain time, and this is also a surrogate of how healthy the person is, because usually if these changes is because there is something anomalous happening, and we were able to also see these changes on circadian rhythm on people that has gone through a surgery operation. And on the right side, we have the speed of ascent that I already mentioned. Here are some references of the work that I just have shown, and I think I can just give the word to Ian.
So thank you very much, Mikkel, for taking us through that, again, a very high-level overview of a huge amount of data annotation and data analysis. As I said, there's about 11 people currently working on analyzing the sphere data, but I think that gives a really helpful overview. Obviously, the aim of the project was not to design sensors, and it was not to do data analytics. The aim of the project was to produce useful things for clinical applications. And so just to let you know where we are with that clinical process. So we used the Sphere technology in a trial of on 40 patients in Sheffield with the NHS Trust there. There we were looking at the effectiveness of their heart surgery on their daily life and their ability to function. We have a project that Mikkel has described called Hemisphere, which was on recovery from orthopedic surgery. That was a collaboration with North Bristol NHS Trust. My colleague Yoav Ben Shlomo is PI of an MRC-funded project called Cuboid, which is using the Sphere technology to detect early signs of dementia. That project is ongoing at the moment. Indeed, there are Sphere systems in dementia patients' homes in Bristol at the moment. And finally, we have a project called PD Sensors, which is a new collaboration with the Bristol Brain Centre with Professor Alan Wone there, looking at symptoms of Parkinson's disease. I think that one's quite current, so I'll say a few words about that. So one of the main things we're interested in doing is providing data to help people developing new treatments for Parkinson's, because at the moment there are very, very few new treatments being approved. So Parkinson's has a range of symptoms, and the question for us is that in order to evaluate, let's say, a new drug that's going through a trial, what we want to do is to be able to monitor actually in the home environment the effect of that medication on things like body movement, quality of movement, bradykinesia, sleep quality, independence, such as people's ability to prepare meals, for example, mobility, getting out of a chair that Mikkel has described to you, and all these other things that Sphere has been doing. So over the last few months, we've had Parkinson's patients living in the Sphere house for periods of up to a week. They are taken off their medication during the course of the week so that we get a signal, a change in their symptoms, which is correlated with their medication. And we're doing a lot of annotation, not just the types of annotation that Mikkel has described here, but also clinical annotations in terms of things like symptom severity. And so this will be a very unusual, indeed unique data set of annotated Parkinson's symptoms in people's own living environment over quite a long period of time. And indeed, we have collaboration with the pharma industry for this project. Here, actually, you can see some of the data from these patients, which is currently being annotated. So I hope that's given a good sort of overview at a very high level of this Sphere project and what we're doing, and indeed why we're doing it. There are many challenges that are still remain to be resolved. So one of the things that will be obvious talking to Mikkel is that the labeled data from the homes is very difficult to acquire. So we have massively more unlabeled data than we have labeled data. So unsupervised and weakly supervised and semi-supervised methods for analyzing that data are a really important theme for the project at the moment. We are, as you know, very interested in sensor fusion, so fusing from different sensor modalities. But I think a really interesting thing there is the fact that those modalities are not always available. So, for example, a wearable may not always be charged, and a video camera simply may not be able to see the participant. So what do you do in terms of classification or regression when you have not just sensor fusion, but sensors that are available to different at different extents and different times, and you still want to be able to do your analysis, even though some of the sensors are sporadic. So I think that's a really interesting challenge when of doing data fusion when the sensors are discontinuous. And the final thing that we're very interested in doing is, actually closing the loop back to the wearable. So actually being able to reconfigure the wearable as a result of what's coming out of machine learning. So kind of active learning in the sense that your classifier changes the feature extraction that's being done on the wearable. So I think these are three big open challenges that the team will be grappling with, in addition to all the things that Mikhail has already described. So that's really all that we wanted to say. We do have a lot of interest in the data from clinical researchers. The data is also available to others, subject to ethics and GDPR. Obviously, people can access our data, but especially we encourage them to think in terms of collaboration. We have a lot of domain knowledge about this data. It's very unusual data. So generally, probably the right approach is collaboration rather than just having the data and trying to figure it out. And I think the final thing to say is that I think the impact of the project on the university has been immense, and particularly our MSc and PhD programs in digital health simply wouldn't have existed. And those of you who are interested in furthering your own data analysis ambitions in a kind of a clinical space might be very well interested in applying for our MSc or PhD programs at the university. So that's all from us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and the seminar is open to questions, which you can get to by Slido.
Thank you very much, Ian and Mikhail. So the first question we've got upvoted on Slido is, have you looked at correlations between household data and economic inequality, and how this may be related to health outcomes?
So yeah, that's a great question. So we have a very large number of hypotheses like this, and of course, you would expect that to be the case. That particular question, we haven't had an opportunity to put anyone actually on it, and the sample size wasn't particularly configured, and the population wasn't particularly configured to look at that. So I would say that yes, that's of great interest. I think, if I was designing a study for that, though, I would probably look at one particular health condition, and we would recruit across a kind of obviously a socioeconomic spectrum in order to look at that. So yes, we are interested, but we haven't recruited a population that's powered to investigate that particular question. But it is an important one, absolutely.
So the next question is, can you expand more on the challenges regarding human behavior using these sensors in homes?
Well, we could probably spend all day expanding upon that and barely scratch the surface. I suppose, the main challenge is that as academics, data quality and control over experiment is what we expect to have. So 99.9% of university research is done in laboratories where you deliberately control for everything. You standardize everything. Everyone does the same thing, and you try and make your data collection kind of almost infinitely perfect and repeatable. However, that has no relevance to daily life. There's no point in trying to say or trying to pretend that we can turn someone's home into a laboratory environment. And even if we could do that, which we obviously can't, it would have no validity anyway, because no one has any interest in health behaviors for people who happen to live in a laboratory. So the challenge here is that what we have to do is always conditioned on the fact that we have no control whatsoever over the experimental environment. And so all the lovely, perfect things that you might want to do on a laboratory experiment, most of them simply don't transfer to the real world at all. And that's a really big change in mindset, for myself and everyone else in the team.
Thank you. And third question we have here is, how many households' data has been analysed?
So that's a good question. Probably about 120 at this point in time across all the different projects. And I would say it also depends on what you mean by analyzed, in terms of, has it been analyzed with regard to every single hypothesis and method that we have? The answer is absolutely not. So in terms of, maybe 5% of the data has been in some sense analyzed, but there's this data has huge amounts of potential, not just for us but for other research groups. And one of our aims obviously is to understand that we can't possibly analyze it in and try every single method and every single hypothesis, which is one of the reasons that we're happy to have collaboration with people who are interested in doing so.
Great. I think we've got time for one more question that's just come in. Can your systems be used to monitor activity in high flow environments, e.g. laboratories to assess workflow and bottlenecks?
Yeah, so in terms of what we would want to do next with Sphere, we're quite interested in bigger environments than homes. So workplaces, actually funny enough, workplaces was kind of like a really big priority for us about a year ago. Then obviously lockdown came, and doing research in workplaces was impossible because no one really had any functioning workplaces, and it was hard to access them. And also it wasn't particularly a hot topic because a lot of those workplaces weren't really operating. But I think, yeah, workflow in laboratory environments and industrial environments, in manufacturing centers, distribution centers, for example, looking at at not just health outcomes but productivity outcomes in those spaces, I think is something that we very much want to do over the next year or so. And anyone who's got an interest in that, please do get in touch.
Great, thank you very much. I think we're about out of time, so it just remains to thank Ian and Mikhail for joining us and presenting as part of this Gene Golding Institute Bristol Data Week. I would encourage you to keep an eye on the social media channels for Digital Health and Sphere, and also the Gene Golding Institute. They're running a institute showcase on the 17th and 18th of February 2022. That's at the M Shed in Bristol, next to Temple Meads, which is a great venue which is open to the public, well worth checking out. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Yeah, see you at our next event.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks.
Bye.